Jen and Sean, I think fair to say you guys both like the movie. You guys are definitely deeper into the lore of Dune than I certainly am.
I mean, obviously, I can fill in a lot of gaps.
Yeah. So for me, this is one of the most frustrating movies I have seen in a long time. And it's frustrating because of the talent that was involved in making this movie. From the director on down to every single actor, it's just who you would want. It's a who's who in the movie making business.
Actually, would you agree that the movie is well cast in general?
Yes. So my biggest so I think the it's a I don't think it's as beautiful as a lot of people are saying. It's okay. It's not as beautiful as 2049.
I agree.
I think one of the things that holds it back from being gorgeous is just a lack of any kind of humanity. It's just wide vistas of nothing. And I know that's the planet, but you don't get any sense of why that's important. Because even on their home world, it's just empty rooms and brooding Timothy Chalamet.
Yeah, Kaladin is probably the one that I think is maybe the most tragic in that. Because
like, how are they rich?
You're supposed to set it up being that they're not only rich, but much more importantly, they're beloved by their people. Like they have a very good society.
Their soldiers just chant Atreides. Okay, cool.
Yeah, but they're like soldiers,
right? Like, of course they will.
Kind of like doesn't count.
So, but it's a competently made movie.
Yeah,
and with all the hype behind it, with how popular the books are. Mm-hmm. This had the potential, on paper, to be one of those movies that goes down in history as one of the best movies of all time, maybe sci-fi movies of all time.
Sure, yeah.
But the problem is that the story is just not there. And part of it, as you guys have already alluded to, is that it's hard to adapt this material. But I find if you're going to do this, when you make a movie, you have to have characters that people care about. And I know apparently with the book, the characters are kind of a secondary to the plot. But
I would argue that. I think some people would get mad at me for saying that, but I don't really see any other way to look at it, because Herbert's world and all of the stuff that he puts in the book is centered around the political animosity from one group to another. And it's a lot, right? Like it's the again, this kind of Machiavellian machinations of like the House Harkonnen versus Atreides, and the way that Duke Atreides. So like this is a thing that also doesn't come up in the movie, which I was kind of sad about, which is like Leto 100% knows that it's a trap. He has a conversation with Jessica, and I think maybe one sort of with Paul about this in the book, which is like he knows that this is suspicious. And he knows that there's no good reason for the Emperor to have made this switch. And he knows that Harkonnen, because this is an ongoing feud for hundreds of years, he knows that they want him dead. And they knows that they want all of them dead. He goes into this, onto Arrakis, saying, and he kind of says this because there's a moment in the movie where he's like, House Atreides will answer the call, or whatever. He kind of does that moment. And that's part of it, right? He's like, part of it is like, I will do what I'm requested of my emperor, right? But the other part of it, he goes, this is a trap. I know it's a trap, and I'm smarter than Baron Harkonnen. So I'm going to go into this trap, and then I'm going to learn things, and then I'm going to win, basically. You don't get a lot of that. Like, you don't get all of the...
You don't get any of it.
The ins and outs of this.
Nothing.
And you don't really get the ins and outs of Arakeen society, which is like the city that they live in, or there's wealthy people who live in that city. There's people who like run the spice mines. There's people who run the water distillers and, all that kind of stuff. And that's the stuff that for me was the letdown of the movie. Like, I like the movie in general, but like there are things that are missing from it that I think would address many of your complaints.
There's, like I said, there's no grounding in I mean, obviously it's not reality, but you need to have this human aspect of connection.
Let me actually ask you a question about this. I assume you noticed that there was a bull in many shots.
Yeah.
Did you get that? Do you know what that is?
His grandfather fought bulls?
Is that all you got out of it?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the kind of thing. This is exactly my point, I think, like of something that gets left out. His grandfather was killed by the bull that's hanging above their...
Did they say that?
They did say it.
Okay.
They did say it at one point. But
I was already kind of in and out by this point.
No, I get it. But the grandfather was actually killed by that bull. And it's a reminder to Leto to not make stupid moves, basically. Moreover, Jessica and Leto, in one of these scenes that you would get that would actually humanize them and give them a better relationship, they have a whole fight when they get to the planet. They get to Arrakis. First of all, they're on Caladan, and she's like, I don't even know why you packed this stupid bull. Because the actual bull, like the way that they describe it in the book, is it's dirty and bloody. It's covered in his grandfather's blood. And they just sprayed something on it to like just encapsulate it, basically, and protect it. So like it's not supposed to be a clean, nicely taxidermied bullhead. It's like a gross, bloody, muddy mess of like his grandfather, viscera and stuff. So she absolutely hates this thing, and she does not want it anywhere. She didn't even want it at all, period. And Leto insists. It's the only thing. He's like, Jessica can do whatever she wants with the entire household, but this is the only thing he insists must be in the dining hall. He's like, this has to be front and center wherever I am all the time. And it is because it is this reminder of like, don't be that guy, right?
Yeah.
And of course, that's all like wrapped up in the sense that he is literally like walking into a thing that he knows is a trap. So it's like, don't be that guy. Don't get gored by a bull. And then, poetically,
right.
Metaphorically, he gets gored by a bull.
Yeah.
Like, Baron Harkonnen is dangerous. All of these things. He's trying to murder him. And sorry for the spoiler, but gets murdered by Harkonnen.
So I think this kind of leads to another problem I have is, we are told that Baron Harkonnen is dangerous.
Yeah.
We're never shown that.
No, not a lot.
We're told that he's bad to the Fremen. Mm-hmm. Never really shown that.
Yeah.
There
are a lot of scenes that would help that.
It just loses me, and we talk about on this podcast, show don't tell, and I think this movie did an absolutely terrible job at doing this.
Yeah.
They showed all the wrong things.
I wonder to some extent, because I've heard that there's a really long, like we were talking before, that there's like some 5-hour cut of this movie. Of course there is, because there's an assembly cut somewhere.
Yeah.
They put all this stuff together. But I do wonder if a lot of the editing choices were built around what the studio thought was going to be action heavy.
Possibly.
Because it cuts right to the battle, like the army battle, right? Soldiers actually shooting at each other and fist fights.
No, there's no guns.
Well, okay, not actual guns, but like,
that's another thing. It's just stupid.
Yeah,
it's just dumb.
Well, they have the shields.
Just do away with it. Make it okay. Oh,
you can't. Gosh. The shields are like it's just such a critical part.
Maybe I just don't like Dune.
Maybe you don't. And
it's possible. It's not for everyone. It's kind of a wild story, and like even though I really enjoyed it, I fully acknowledge that it is not for absolutely everyone.
So when you describe the book, and the plot, and like all that political stuff, I like that kind of thing.
Super intellectual, though.
But you get nothing like that in the movie.
So this is where I actually think the movie is. People talk about the movie being unmakeable, right? They talk about it being like an unfilmable book, or they talk about the book being an unfilmable book. And one of the things I think is interesting about that is I think that, yes, it is a very complicated thing. You've got to set up a lot of interplay between a lot of different people and a lot of different motivations kind of competing with each other. I mean, look, we didn't even, and it is in fact 40 minutes into this, and I want to start wrapping this up. Like we can't, there's not even any chance. Like we talk about Dr. Yue, who gets almost no setup whatsoever in the movie and then suddenly betrays, again, sorry for the spoilers, suddenly betrays Leto. He actually has a really good motivation for doing this. It is very unclear in the movie version. But that's not the only problem. The other problem is the book is so intellectual in terms, I don't mean it's so smart necessarily. There are things that I think are very smart about the book. But what I mean is it is a cerebral story. It is a story about logic and ideas, and it is not a story about feelings. It is not a story about characters like having relationships with each other that are moving or emotional, right? It's just not an emotional book, like really at all, you know. And even you can see this in the way that Herbert gives people superpowers, because all the superpowers are intellectual. You know, you're a you're an ultra logical human computer, or you have the power of mind control, or you have, you know, all of these kinds of things. You can see into the future, or you can see across space-time, right? Like, these are not emotional powers. So it's hard to connect. And I think that that's really the challenge with filming the movie. I liked it because I have a lot of that backstory that I can kind of bring to bear on it. But I kind of get it.
Maybe that's the disconnect. Is what I'm most familiar is the Out of Frame episode that put out, because I haven't read the books, and I had just the 1984 movie. I've seen clips, and I'm not gonna do it. But you know, it's one of those things where you either, I think that you have to, in movies and TV, you have to have characters that people care about. You don't have the books. The books are just a different medium. Yeah. So you have to, I know this is a faithful adaptation, and that's what the fans want, but sometimes things just don't translate straight. And they've even, like Lord of the Rings, they made tons of adaptations to the story to make that fit for a movie.
They're mostly small for the most part. They're subtle. Not necessarily small, but subtle in most cases.
But there's and obviously, you know, they cut stuff out here, but with this, it seems
he also did 12 hours of movie.
We're probably going to get there with this.
I think they're only doing
two parts.
two, but maybe I'm
and
wrong.
This is the other thing. Maybe this is just the wrong medium. Maybe this is an epic TV series.
I've had a lot of people make that point, and I actually generally agree with it. I think it might have been smarter, but
yeah,
here we are.